Hello everyone, I am Monsef Moussaoui from GDG Algiers. Welcome to the third and final talk for today. Don't worry, we still have tomorrow. Stay in. This talk is entitled You Are Loading Images Wrong in React, presented by Islam Maboud. He is a full-stack software engineer at Toptal and professional content creator on YouTube. I highly recommend you to check his YouTube channel, Coder1. The link is in the description. If you have any questions during the talk, don't hesitate to drop them in the comment section. Islam Maboud, Mr. Islam, the floor is yours.
Hello. Yeah, thank you for the introduction. Okay, so let's get started. So today's talk is going to be about a talk about you are loading images the wrong way in React. So for this talk, we're going to be presenting particularly is like what are the best ways to take your React application. For any React application nowadays, they have included. So we need to ensure that we are loading images the correct way. We need to ensure we have the best user experience when it comes to like loading images, large images, or a bunch of very like couple of different sizes of different images. And we need to also make sure that we are loading images correctly for our servers and for our entire application. So to get started with we're going to be seeing what we are going to cover in the whole talk. So first, we're going to know how Unsplash those different approaches on like how you use images in React. Approach one is going to be using the browser lazy loading features, which is the browser integrator, the vanilla browser feature available mostly on most browsers nowadays. The second approach is going to be lazy loading images with a custom React component. It's going to allow you to load images, add some effects like blurriness, add some grayscale effects, and slightly make the user experience a little bit better when it comes to loading images in React overall. And third approach in our case is using blur hash placeholder with lazy load. And last but not least is going to be how the hash can improve the user experience by 10x. Okay, so first section, how Unsplash does load images. If you're not familiar with Unsplash, Unsplash is a great, awesome platform that provides free of charge pictures and high quality pictures and images of all sorts. So you can go to unsplash.com to really see what I'm talking about and how images are loaded in that case and what it does behind the scenes and everything. But the main idea behind Unsplash in here, it does have tens of thousands of images and it loads them daily. Now, if you look at activity in here, there is all-time views on Unsplash, and it's just crazy number. It's 920 billion when it comes to how many people see that, and views per second are 6,000, and we're talking about images, so 6,000 per second images or even more images are loaded. That's a really crazy kind of number, and Unsplash does actually handle that correctly when it comes to servers, load balancing. Plus, it actually shows and it allows you to see a great user experience when those images are loaded. So let's first go ahead and see how Unsplash actually works behind the scenes. So let's try to reverse engineer the Unsplash image loading technique or mechanism to see exactly how we can mimic that kind of technique and how we can use it on our own and how we can re-implement that on our actual application. So first we got this is really this diagram in here shows how the images are loaded. First, initially the user sees this placeholder. So when you load the page, when you first get into the Unsplash page, obviously your network, or sorry, your browser gonna start actually loading images from the network or from the Unsplash servers. And obviously those images are a little bit large, so they're going to take a little bit of time. So first they're going to show a placeholder, and the placeholder looks something like this, where it's actually blurred. So at first it's going to be a blurred placeholder in here, and that's where you're going to be seeing at first. And once, like later on, once the image is fully loaded, you're going to see the actual image in here, which is obviously the original image. Now, how can we have this same effect where we see a blurry kind of colorful placeholder image before we can actually see the original image in there? So this, I mean, this is really a good user experience when it comes, because the user, when you sees that, is going to be, oh, I got like, there's a picture, and I know that somehow there is like the picture is blurred, and I know from the blurriness of that picture, I know exactly like this picture is still loading, which means, oh, I'm going to just like chill back, and I'm just going to go ahead and wait for this. And if you have like a really slow network connection, yes, I'm just going to stay back, and I'm just going to wait for this to finish loading. And after that is finished loading, you're obviously going to be seeing the image that you're seeing over there. Now, how does this actually work? Now, for the implementation, this is like for like whatever browser you're using nowadays, especially latest browsers with HTML5 support, obviously, and like Chrome, Firefox, Opera, even Edge, literally everything, Internet Explorer in that case. But every single one of these actually supports a lazy loading image API that is provided by the vanilla JavaScript. And this API is going to allow you to actually lazy load images, and it's just going to improve the performance like overall. Now, so if you take, for example, this is this code example we got in here. We can use, so let's say we got like an image container. We got our component in here, which is a browser lazy loading component. We got images container, and inside of that container, exactly, we're going to be loading, or we're going to be rendering a bunch of images. And those images, obviously, you can fetch them from a server or whatever I want. In our case, we're fetching them from a server. We're doing images.map, and we're mapping or going through and looping through every single image. Now, for each image, we render an image component, and in this case, for the image component itself, you are setting the loading, and obviously this image component is a bare minimum, is a vanilla HTML React component, isn't like a custom component, but it's just like the standard image component provided by the browser. So for this one, we got the loading attribute, or the loading prop. So once we set the loading prop, there's two options what you can do. You can set it to eager, which is going to be loaded as soon as the web page actually starts loading. The image is going to be loaded immediately, which is sometimes a little bit bad, because when you have, like, let's say 100 images on a web page, or maybe, I'm not going to say 100, maybe I got like a 20 images loaded on the web page, you don't want to start loading all of these images, right? Because that's going to cause a disaster in your network kind of performance, and the user's going to wait forever. What's the alternative for this one is actually to change this to like lazy. So you go loading, lazy, and this will be lazy loaded only when the user actually goes into the viewport. So once the image becomes viewable inside of the user's viewport, so for example, the user is actually on a website and he goes and scrolls down into the actual image, that's only way to start loading the image. And that's obviously is going to be triggered by the browser, is going to be taken care of by the browser. So you don't have to do anything on your own. Just setting loading equals lazy, and you're good to go. The other thing, you also must set the height and the width for this. Otherwise, it won't work, because the height and width in here should be already known by the browser in order to be able to do this lazy loading, and in order to be able to like kind of like assume the size of the image and like put a placeholder for it before it actually starts loading. Okay, nice. Now, what are the downsides of using this? Why not a lot of people actually try not like use this, or why a lot of developers try to avoid going this way? Simply because this makes the user experience actually suffer, and it makes it go like all the wrong sideways that you don't want to actually go, or like become as a actual developer. Why? Because like screen here, this lazy loading images, this is what we're gonna get if you use the browser lazy loading property in here, or prop. The images are gonna be like half loaded, and you're gonna see them actually being loaded at time, which doesn't make a lot of sense, and it just makes the user experience, oh, the image is like, I see the image loading like in real time, and I don't really like that. I don't see the image because I see an empty space, which means I'm going to see, oh, there is an empty space. What is this empty space? It's super bad, and it just like only use this when you have to use this, if you have no any other choice and you can't actually implement the best ways or best approaches. But this, you can use this as a last resort. Second, for our second approach in here, what we can go through is use lazy loading React components. Now, luckily for us, there is a really awesome component from a really awesome library called React Lazy Load Image Component. So using this like library in React, obviously, we can actually do lazy loading in a really nice way. And this can allow us to like still load images, but we can also like apply some sort of effects like blurriness, grayscale, and particularly blurriness in that case, because it's going to give us some like look and feel the same way as we did have it on the blur hash side. Remember, we want to mimic, we want to re-implement the how Unsplash actually loads the images, and want to have the same thing. So here, as you see, I've got an images container. If you look at the code, I loop through images.map, and I render the lazy load image. This lazy load image is imported from the React lazy load image component library I'm talking about. So this one is kind of like the same kind of image, vanilla image, standard image components. And all it does, the extra thing in here you see, there's an effect. So you can set this to blur or any other effect. I would highly recommend setting this to blur because it's really the best effects for loading images. Second, there's the placeholder SRC. Now, this placeholder SRC is what you want to display while the image is still loading. You can actually display the actual image, which I can do in here, or you can completely display a different placeholder while the image is loading. Like maybe, I don't know, like a placeholder saying loading or image. It's not the best way, but I think the best way to go through this is just like use the image by itself or the actual image you're loading. This way you see the blurriness and you see exactly what's going on. And also, don't forget about the width and height. They has to be set beforehand. Okay, and if you look at the results, this is what we're going to get. So this is going to give the user an actual hint that, oh, the images are loading because I see some blurriness. I can't see the actual image because it's completely ruled, and that's going to give the a hint or a look and feel to the actual user that those images are still loading because they are still blurred. But there's still the same issue we had before. We still got some empty blank space while the images are like still loading, and like the images are loaded part by part, which doesn't make a lot of sense, and it makes quite bad of like look and feel, especially if you have, as I said before, a bunch of images loaded. Like you start like a load, for example, 20, maybe 30 images at once, and you got this website. You don't want to do that. Even if you have 2 or 1 image on your portfolio, you still don't want to do that. Okay. If you jump to the third, and the best approach, in my opinion, in here is the blur hashing approach, which is, I'm not sure, when I was actually looking into this and when I was trying to do like a video tutorial about this, I think 2 months ago or something, I didn't find a lot of resources out there. I didn't find a lot of people knowing about this way, even though this is a really elegant and a really awesome way to actually load images, and it's going to provide a very elegant and very nice user experience. So let's say, for example, here, blur hashing. Well, let's first go ahead and see what is blur hashing. So blur hashing allows us to extract a colorful placeholder from an actual image, and this placeholder is going to be represented into like a 20-ish to 30-ish characters long, and that is it. So imagine here, for example, you got an image. This image, using a blur hash algorithm, is going to be converted into this string, this blur hash string. That's what it's called, a blur hash string. This string in here can be then later on saved on a database alongside your images, and can be returned back like alongside those images when you do like you want to get the images from your API server. You're going to return the actual image URL or something, and you're going to return this blur hash string. Now, this blur hash string can be used to get a result like this, where you see the colorful, it looks like it's blurred, but it's more of like the actual placeholder string in here is actually giving you the hint that this is the actual result. And obviously, when you look at it first, you're going to see, oh, this, I know the image in here looks like it's still loading. I can still see some sort of colors of the image, and I can, like, my mind can still see through what the image is going to look like, or eventually what's going to look like. But it just, like, the image isn't loaded just yet, because that's what I give the user an impression. And this is the first impression. So as soon as the web page is loaded, this is what the user sees. Even though the image is still loading, even though you still have a really slow 3G network or a 2G network or whatever, you're still going to have this result. And the user immediately is going to see, oh, the image is still loading. I'm going to just chill back and wait to see it. And that is the same kind of scenario on how what Unsplash does. I mean, Unsplash does it a little bit better way because they have better servers and everything, but we try to mimic this as much, like as good as we possibly could today, and how this basically can work behind the scenes. Okay, now if we jump into how this actually works, from an API side, and obviously, as I said before, the Blur hashing kind of technique should be implemented both sides. It should be implemented in the front end where you're going to be rendering images, obviously, on your React code, and also it has to be implemented on the API side. And for Blur hashing, it can work literally anywhere. If you're using PHP, Laravel, if you're using React, if you're using Node.js, literally any, like even Rust and Ruby on Rails, they all have their own implementations and abstractions to use Blur hashing algorithms. So yeah, stay assured you can use that without any issues. Now, for Blur hashing, this is what it looks like. So you can imagine this JSON block in here you see in front of you here is one of the actual database, or what actual database you want to have. So for example, you got an images, like a list of images saved on your database. You got the image name in here, or the image URL or image file name, which you're going to be sending back to the user or to your front end for the front end, obviously going to use that to render it. And you want to also store the Blur hash property against it, or you can name it whatever you want. But the main part in here, you have to store the Blur hash string of that image. So that way, obviously, the front end can now use this Blur hash to display the Blur hash blurred version before the actual image actually gets rendered and loaded. Okay, how can we use this behind the scenes, and how does the server work with this? Now, as Chris said, this function in front of you might seem a little bit kind of complicated, but it's actually super straightforward. This encode image to Blur hash, all it takes a path to the image. So let's say you got on your server, you got a bunch of images, and you want to actually go ahead and loop through and actually Blur hash all of them, or just generate this Blur hash string from all the actual images. So you can use this function. So encode image to Blur hash, it takes a path of an actual image. Obviously, you can use this instead of a loop itself. And this returns a promise. It uses a library, a really awesome library from Node.js that allows you to manipulate images. It's called Sharp. And it does a couple of manipulations, like it resizes that, because Blur hashing literally doesn't take or need a lot of like a huge resolution of that image. So you can resize that to 32 by 32, as you see what it's doing there. And it's removing alpha, because this is actually all it needs. Then last but not least, it removes, it takes that to a buffer, and that buffer is going to be encoding into, like you see this ends a clamp array. This is literally where the magic is happening inside of that encode function. And this is where the actual magic of Blur hashing actually happens. And obviously, we're just resolving without Blur hash. Obviously, if you want to have more details about this, you can go to the documentation I said before. The documentation is straightforward. You can find it in GitHub, and yeah, you can easily implement this on your framework or your language. Okay, so once we got this on the actual like the server, and everything is actually working fine. So we got the implementation, we got the encoding, all good. This is so we're going to have in here on the front end. So in React, now we can actually go ahead and display those Blur hash versions of images, and like swap them with the original image whenever the actual original image is fully loaded. So if you take, for example, in here, you got this lazy load image, which is our original image. And what I'm doing with this one is actually having URL, and the browser, as soon as it actually sees that image, is going to start loading it regardless. I'm having two event handlers in those. We got onload and before load. I'm handling those because I would like to know when the image is loaded so I can hide my blur hash. And also I would like to track the progress of the loading of that image. The second one, I got a Boolean called isLoaded, and it got another Boolean isLoad started. Now, both of these Booleans are just meant to make sure we hide this blur hash version when the actual image or when the original image is loaded, and only show this before the image is loaded, obviously. So the blur hash in here, you can actually import it from the blur hash kind of npm package or the blur hash library, and you can have you can style it however you want. The same thing, you have to set width and height. You have to set that. You can set what is the resolution you used before. And remember, we used a different resolution before, which is a 32 by 32. So make sure to use the same resolution over there. And you can play with it or play around with it, all the props you can pass through to make this actually work with your application the best way. And the hash in here, which is the most important part, is you provide it from the image that we put it before in the database, which is the blur hash version. And that is it. And this will actually work in the perfect sense. So if we jump to see how this list actually looks like, these are the final results. So from the exclusively from the left-hand side in here, those two images are still loading, because the screws in here, they're still loading, but we still immediately, once the web page actually starts, immediately you see this blur hash version, and the user actually immediately notice, oh, I know there is an image in here, and I know because it's blur hashed and it has some blurriness, some sort of, I see the contents behind the scenes, but I'm pretty sure that there is an image and it's still loading. So, okay, I'm just gonna go ahead and wait for it. But on the other hand, they got an example in here. This is the final image, and this the one from the right hand side in here is an image that is fully loaded and it's done. So first it starts at blur hashed, and once it's actually done, it's going to completely replace that and swap it with the original image. So in this, we ensure there is an awesome user experience, and that's why it's going to improve this by 10x. And the user is going to know that the images are not fully loaded yet, so they're going to be just waiting for it and sit back, chill, and wait for the images to fully load. So this is absolutely the best way to load images. Obviously, if you're capable to do all the implementation from the server side to the front end side and to have them all connected to each other's, but this is completely the best way if you're working with images and you have websites, and if you want to have your web application actually works in a perfect sense when it comes to loading images and have an absolutely awesome user experience for modern images and how images are interpreted and manipulated. Anyway, so we came to the end in here, and I have a full video tutorial actually explaining this on my YouTube channel. It's called Your Loading Images Run, the same title of this talk. So yeah, if you want to more details, if you have want to know about the implementation, if you want to know about the GitHub repository behind this one and how everything is actually working, I would really recommend going and watching this video maybe, or just going there or going to my GitHub and grabbing the repository. And yeah, so hope you guys can actually enjoy that and can actually have this, and this can actually be very, very helpful for you. So anyway, guys, that was the end of our talk. Thank you all. Appreciate your attention. And yeah, let me know if you have any questions. I would be super happy to answer your questions. Yeah, thank you all for your attention.
Thank you so much, Mr. Islam, for this amazing talk. I already shared your video in the comment. I hope the audience can see it about lazy loading. If you have any question,
Okay.
don't hesitate to drop them in the comment section. If we don't have any question, I guess so. Thank you so much, Mr. Islam, for this talk. We really appreciate that for your contribution in DevFest 2022. I encourage everyone to check his amazing YouTube channel. The link is in the description. Everyone, you are doing a very amazing job. Thank you so much,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Islam, and see
Thank you,
you
guys.
in other events.
Yeah, inshallah. Thank you.
Inshallah.
See ya.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Bye bye. You too. Bye.
Oh, there's a question in the last minute. What's your thought about image, next 13 image, maybe?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. In fact, I I have like a tutorial planned out for this one. For particularly for the next image, because it's literally an amazing component that allows you to optimize images. Um, Especially if you are familiar with the new Next.js version 13, they brought like a radical changes to how Next.js actually works, and particularly the Next.js image components that you just asked about. So I can tell you that if you're asking from a perspective of how, like, if Next.js image is a good implementation, I would definitely say yes. So if you are using Next.js, I would really recommend you go with the Next.js and not use the regular image kind of components. And in fact, Next.js image can work with the same blur hashing technique we were just explaining like a couple of minutes ago. So yeah, I would highly recommend go with Next.js image. And in fact, also the Next.js image has its own kind of like mechanism to do the blurriness, because that's server-side rendered and it can be handled real well. But there's still some advanced side of it. There isn't a lot of tutorials out there, just allows you to implement that. So yeah, I think it would be a really nice alternative to have some sort of like a component that works on React, but I'm afraid of it's not really capable of doing that because it doesn't have an ecosystem and to have all of those like wired up together. But overall, yes, Next.js image is an absolutely a beast, hell of a components, and yeah, I would really recommend going with that and actually learning more about it. And yeah, I will try to put a video tutorial about this because I'm planning about one in the future. I would try to have a good demo on how you can use this and why this can be like a huge improvement to your projects compared to like using the standard image components. So yeah, thank you. Cheers.
Thank you, Mr. Islam, for answering his question. If you have any other question, you can still ask them. If there isn't, Mr. Islam, you can give a final word concerning today's talk.
Oh yeah, sure. So yeah, I think final thoughts or final words about the today's talk on React and how to properly load images. I think images are super important aspects of the web, and particularly the modern web nowadays, because it literally, like, images are everywhere. So if you think Instagram, if you think Unsplash, if you think Facebook, any platform nowadays like manipulates images one way or another. And us as developers, we literally need to grasp on those kind of fundamentals, and we also need to like go and wrap the whole kind of like what is out there and how we can optimize this and push it forward in order to be able to like have more performant application, have less like loading time for our applications, and have also always focus on user experience. So I think images are important, and I think we should care more about them because I haven't found a lot of resources out there explaining how to better load images or how to better manipulate images on web applications and in general in the like on how images actually work and how they are being loaded. But yeah, hopefully we can create more resources about those, and we can help actually go into like the modern web and actually help pushing forward those image fundamentals and into more of like an advanced fundamentals. So yeah, and yeah, I think that's it for today's talk. So yeah, thank you for listening, and then catch you hopefully in another talk. Yeah, inshallah.
Thank you so much, Mr. Islam. I guess that's the end of the talk. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Bye bye. Good night.